Whenever you get into a new business, it's extremely important that you understand all of the terms that the people use when operating in that specific space. That's why we chose to start the pay-per-call masterclass by reviewing a glossary of terms, not only for pay-per-call specifically, but also general business terms so that you have a handle on everything you need to know to have a conversation with the players in the space. I wrote these glossaries off the top of my head. And so I'm telling you this because I want you to understand how important it is to actually know this material and to be able to use it in a conversation when you're working with people. People in this industry will judge you by how you communicate specifically, so it's very important that you understand not only pay-per-call terms, but sound like a business person when you're having these conversations with people. I've done this list in alphabetical order, and so we're going to start from the beginning and go all the way through to the end, and I chose to write out all the terms for you so that you can read along while I read them back to you, so hopefully that your comprehension will be increased. Third party. A third party is a company or other entity that is a service provider or partner, but not wholly owned by yourself or whoever you're talking with. For instance, we use a third-party CRM to track our sales data. And that means that someone else makes that CRM, but we use it, so it's a third party. ACH, Automated Clearinghouse, an electronic funds transfer system in the United States designed for bulk batch processing of payments. Typically used by companies for sending large volumes of regular payments to vendors, this form of transfer is not immediate and can be recalled. And I think that's important to understand because most people think an ACH deposit is permanent, but it absolutely is not. Most ACH transfers can be charged back for a period of 60 days. So you always need to be careful when accepting an ACH payment from someone that's not a completely trusted party. AI, or artificial intelligence, the ability of a computer to mimic human cognitive skills such as learning and understanding. Openly, most people that are claiming their company is using artificial intelligence are absolutely full of shit. The vast majority of technology out there right now is simply a machine learning model that does very simple tasks to mimic human behavior. However, most of these companies don't actually have artificial intelligence, and it's a really big buzzword that's used all over the place right now. Analytics, the process of collecting, interpreting, and communicating meaningful patterns and actionable insights from data. That means we're going to take a bunch of data, wherever we get it from, and we're going to crunch it and figure out conclusions from that data. We're going to figure out why that data is meaningful and important so that we can use it inside of our businesses. For instance, we're going to look at call logs in this course, and we run analytics on those call logs to figure out where there are problems and we can make improvements. Analytics is a very powerful thing, and you're going to absolutely need to learn how to use analytics to push your business forward. AOV, or average order value, the average value per order over a period of time like a week or a month. This statistic is used when planning for future sales or working with partners that are performance-based. And so basically we're going to take a month's worth of sales and look at how much volume was done in dollar amounts, so maybe $1,000, and we did 100 sales, and so the average order value is $10 per sale. AP, accounts payable. This is the department responsible for paying bills and sending payments to clients, vendors, and partners. So if you're working with someone and they owe you money, you're most likely going to have to deal with their accounts payable department to get them to pay you. API is an application program interface, and that's a set of protocols and tools for building software applications. So for instance, Ringba has an API, and that allows our clients to write applications, programs, and other pieces of software that integrate and interact with our platform to achieve a desired result. And so you can make an application that pulls your reporting data, or maybe you can make an application that controls where your calls go depending on specific information, or maybe you want to integrate with our Pingtree API, which allows real-time bidding for calls as you're generating them and selling them to other parties. AR, accounts receivable. This is the department responsible for making sure all funds owed to the company are received. And so if you owe a company money, you best believe you're going to hear from their accounts receivables department because they're going to want to collect those funds. Arbitrage is a business practice that involves taking advantage of a price difference between two markets. And so this is a term that's used a lot in media buying. It essentially means that you're going to go out and buy clicks for 50 bucks, and those clicks may or may not turn into $100 worth of conversions. And so what you're doing is arbitraging the difference between cost and payout to achieve a profit. And that's in the best case scenario. A lot of media buying ends up in a loss, and that's not an arbitrage, that's just a loss. ARR is annual recurring revenue, and that's a measure of how much recurring revenue a business can expect every year. Typically used by companies that sell software, subscriptions, and services. And so basically what we do is quantify the amount of sales we have on a monthly basis and convert that into annual revenue. So if you did $100,000 last month in sales, you could say that you're doing $1.2 million in annual reoccurring revenue. Asset, something that holds value or generates a profit on behalf of yourself or your business. Or it can also be a human asset, which is called a cultivated relationship where value can be extracted. And so in the terms of what we're talking about in this masterclass, an asset can be something like a website or a Facebook page or a list of phone numbers or something that has value intrinsic to you that you can use to create revenue for your business and generate a profit. Attrition rate. The rate customers cancel their reoccurring billing or abandon a product or service. So if you have a product that has a monthly fee to it, which a lot of pay-per-call buyers do, the attrition rate is the number of customers that cancel that product or service on a monthly basis, and then you quantify that into a percentage, and you want to calculate that for every single one of your traffic sources or every single one of your publishers to find out which customers last the longest and cancel the least. B2B, business to business. This is when a business sells to another business directly. B2B campaigns are typically harder, but are also typically larger, have higher commissions. And so when you're selling to someone who's a business owner, typically they want to spend more money, or the products and services that they're looking for cost a lot more. And so a B2B sale is typically worth a lot more than a B2C sale. So B2C is business to consumer, and this is when a business sells directly to a consumer. So maybe they're selling auto insurance, or maybe it's a restaurant, or literally anything that's sold to a consumer is a business to consumer sale. Biweekly payments. These are payments that are made every 2 weeks. Typically, payments made on a biweekly basis are made as biweekly net 7, which means the funds due for those 2 weeks will be paid 7 days after the closing of the billing period. So you have 2 weeks worth of commissions, and you're paid those commissions 7 days after the close of that 2-week period. So you're getting paid twice a month, but there's a 7-day delay on each of those payments. Big data, this is the process of working with large and complex data sets with the goal of finding meaningful patterns. So similar to analytics, big data is for crunching huge amounts of data. So maybe you have millions and millions of clicks that you've received through a tracking platform over a period of time. You're going to do some big data work, crunch all those numbers, and figure out where there are patterns inside of your data so that you can take those patterns and then monetize them in unique ways. Brand. The overall perception of a company in the eyes of consumers or their specific customers. Some brands don't sell to consumers, but they're absolutely brands. And so if you think about brands on a global scale, companies like Coca-Cola or Google or Dell have created an amazing worldwide brand. And this is your goal whenever building a company, is to do a lot of branding to make sure that people know who your company is, and they have a good solid feeling whenever they see your logo or interact with someone from your company or one of your products. Brokering. This is a business practice that facilitates a transaction between a buyer and seller in exchange for a commission. And so basically a broker has someone who wants to buy something, and also knows someone who wants to sell something, and they facilitate that transfer and take a margin in the middle. And so maybe they buy for $10, sell for $15, they keep $5, and that's a broker. And so whenever working in the pay-per-call space, you want to get rid of the brokers and get as direct as possible with your buyers if you have the capital to do so, because whenever you're direct with a buyer, you typically make more money. And so brokers don't necessarily add a lot of value. They do business development, they facilitate payments, but in general, they're just trying to make some profit without necessarily doing a whole lot of work. Business intelligence. These are the strategies and tools that a company uses for analyzing business information. And so whenever you're running a business, you want to have as much business intelligence as possible. And that can be intelligence and information on the market you're working in, the type of campaigns you're running, traffic sources you're working with. You just want as much information as possible about the niche that you're working in so that you can have competitive advantage over other people. Typically, the more you know in business, the better off you're going to be. And if your competitors know less than you, you're doing a really good job, and you can leverage that information for competitive advantage and put your company in a better situation than your competitors. Cash flow, the flow of revenue into your business on a monthly basis. And that doesn't mean profit, it just means the amount of money that's flowing into your business on a monthly basis. And so some people are going to brag about having a ton of cash flow, but cash flow is essentially a vanity metric. It doesn't mean a whole lot. In reality, the most important thing to your business should always be profit without question. A chargeback, this is what happens when someone disputes a billing transaction. The return of funds to a consumer initiated by the issuing bank of the instrument used by a consumer to settle a debt. That's a complicated definition for a chargeback. And it essentially is when a consumer is not happy, they call their bank, cancel a transaction, and the company that sold the product or service is on the hook for that. You can dispute a chargeback. A lot of companies do. They're sometimes hard to win, but it's very important that you understand that anytime you accept a credit card, there's a risk that someone will charge back that transaction and you'll lose money from it. So that's why fraud controls are very, very important. And later in this course, we'll talk more specifically about these types of situations. Churn rate. This is the rate in which users leave a platform or service. And so if you sell a service that has a monthly billing component, say like auto insurance, your churn rate would be the percentage rate of users that leave you on a monthly basis out of your portfolio. And so if you have a 10% churn rate on a monthly basis, 10% of all your customers are leaving you for whatever reason. COGS, these are your cost of goods sold. And this is the final cost of your product when they arrive to you as finished goods. So if you take into account all the manufacturing costs or all of the infrastructure costs of the call center, for instance, all of the management costs, shipping if it's a physical product, telecommunications services if you're a call center, just every single cost that's required to actually complete a sale, that's your cost of goods sold. So in pay-per-call, a lot of companies selling over the phone don't necessarily sell a physical product. So their cost of goods sold are going to include their phone bill, their labor of people answering the phone, their telephones, their breakage of equipment, their taxes and everything required to keep employees in place to answer those phones, and a laundry list of other costs that drive into their cost of goods sold. Collaboration, when two or more parties work together to realize a goal. And a lot of people in the online marketing space call collaborations a JV or a joint venture. It just means two people or an organization are working together to come up with something of value to people that people will purchase. Collections is the process of pursuing payment for outstanding debts. So very simply, if you don't pay your bill, chances are you're gonna get sent to collections, and then you're gonna understand this term intimately because people like to be paid. Commission, compensation based on performance, typically for selling a good or a service on behalf of a company. And if we're talking about pay-per-call specifically, it's a commission earned for every single qualified phone call that someone answers the phone for and meets all the conversion criteria. So if you have a phone call, go to a call center. Maybe they're on the phone for 20 minutes. It qualifies as a commissionable call. You're going to receive your payout for that call, and that's your raw commission. Contracts are a formal agreement between two or more companies that's enforceable by law, at least in the United States. If you enter a contract with somebody, they have a way to enforce that contract if you don't meet the obligations. That's what the legal system's for. And I will say this, that it is always extremely important to have a contract or an IO, which is an insertion order, a very simple contract, between you and everyone you're working with, whether it's a pay-per-call network or a direct buyer or your business partner or a service provider or a contractor, an employee. It doesn't matter. In business, every single party that you're working with, you should have a contract with, you should have an agreement with them, and it should be in writing. And the reason for that is so everyone understands what the terms of your agreement are. There's no questions whatsoever. There's no confusion, and everyone feels comfortable. And if something happens and there is a dispute when working with someone, you can go back to that contract and review it together and say, look, this is what we agreed to, and it's much easier to have a business relationship there that doesn't end in a negative manner when you have a contract. Okay, my dad always used to say to me that an honest man will give you a contract without question, and he's absolutely right. If you ask someone for a contract and they don't want to give it to you, that's a really shady thing, even if you know them well. And so just always get a contract and cover your bases. CRM is customer relationship management. This is the software to manage consumer information and the sales process. And so at Ringba, we use a CRM to manage our sales process, and that just means that all of our business development people log into their CRM, they keep track of all their data and their deals and their contacts in there, and that allows us to have a centralized resources to keep track of everything that's moving through our business on a daily basis. And so as your business grows, you're going to want to look into a CRM so that you can keep track of your team, performance metrics, partner information, customer information, you name it. You want to keep track of everything, and that's what a CRM is for. DBA, that's doing business as, and that's a government registration of a brand or a trade name that someone's operating under. So to do business in the United States and many other countries, you need to have a legal DBA. You need to register your business with the government so you can open bank accounts, and so you can legally transact business in whatever country you're operating in. Now also, Google has some very interesting rules with call-only ads, and they require a legal DBA to actually accept phone calls. So you're going to want to learn how to file a DBA. You can do it in your home state. You can do it at the county level. It's usually pretty cheap, sometimes as cheap as $10 to get a DBA. And so it's a very simple process, and you're going to want to have one of these as an absolute bare minimum if you're getting into business. An e-check, this is an electronic transfer of money from one bank account to another. You need to be a little bit careful with these, especially if you're accepting e-checks as payments from consumers or people who owe you a sizable amount of money, because e-checks, like normal checks, can absolutely bounce and they can be charged back. And so there's risk associated with accepting an e-check. Feedback, this is the process of reviewing inputs and their corresponding outputs with the goal of improving performance. So you get feedback from your customers, you get feedback from your business partners, you get feedback from your employees, you get feedback from your wife, you get feedback from everyone you possibly can, and then you review that information, and then you make changes to the way you're operating so that you can improve just about everything in your life, frankly. GDPR, this is the General Data Protection Regulation for Europe. And this is the regulation for simplifying data privacy laws in the EU and protecting consumers with severe penalties for non-compliance. The GDPR has absolutely ridiculous penalties if you violate it. So if you're operating in Europe, or you're taking phone calls in Europe, or you have websites in Europe, or just about doing anything that involves consumer data in Europe, you need to understand the GDPR. Google it, you can read it. It's like 118 pages long, but there's a lot of great summaries on the internet with this information in it. But you should at least understand the problems you can run into and the things you have to complete if you're going to operate in Europe. This is not optional. can be very dangerous for the success of your business if you're not complying. Going direct. The process of learning who an advertiser is and cutting out the middleman or broker in the value chain. For instance, if you're working with an advertiser at an affiliate network and you go direct, you would cut out the affiliate network and then work directly with the advertiser. Now, you should be aware that this typically comes with higher payouts and more profit margin, but also carries significant more payables risk. Because most upstanding affiliate networks pay their affiliates even if the advertisers don't pay their invoice. If you go direct to an advertiser, you do not have an affiliate network in the middle guaranteeing your payout. And so affiliate networks usually always pay faster than advertisers do, bearing some of the financial risk in the transaction. So by going direct, you will most likely have to wait longer for your payment. And so I'm a big advocate of cutting out networks and brokers in a situation because it raises your profit margin, allows you to spend more money on acquiring users, and that gives you a competitive advantage. But it is more dangerous. You are going to have more cash capital, and you're really going to have to look into the buyers on the other side of a transaction. Just because a pay-per-call network or an affiliate network is working with an advertiser or a buyer does not necessarily mean they're a good one or they pay their bills on time. So you always want to make sure that you know who you're doing business with. They have check their references, talk to them, and start slow so you don't end up in a situation where you have a really big invoice, especially if it's your first one, and then they just decide not to pay it. Gross margin. This is your revenue minus the cost of goods and advertising costs. Cut that. Gross margin is your revenue minus the cost of goods and advertising costs. This is a really bad sentence. Cut here again. Gross margin. Revenue minus the cost of goods and advertising costs leaves your gross profit or gross margin. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our revenue, which let's say is $1,000, and our advertising costs, which were $500, and so our gross margin would be 50% or $500. Gross revenue, this is the total of all funds that come into your business during a specific period of time. So if you did $10,000 in sales this week, your gross revenue this week is $10,000. Home services, these are businesses that provide services to homeowners, plain and simple. And the reason it's in here is because this is an absolutely huge vertical for pay-per-call. HR, human resources, this is the management of staff with an end goal of maximizing employee productivity, satisfaction, and performance. And so I say employee satisfaction because it's important that if you have employees, they're satisfied, fulfilled, love their job, and work really hard for you. A lot of HR departments are there to protect the company and specifically to worry about the company and not the employees. But that's a different type of organization than I run, so I don't truly understand how to build an HR department like that. That to me is a toxic HR department. So for the most part, your leaders and people in your HR department should be maximizing employee productivity and maximizing employee satisfaction, which leads to incredibly good employee performance. Incentive alignment. This is when the goals and objectives between two businesses are in alignment with each other in a collaborative way. When incentives align, the likelihood for a win-win situation is high. For instance, if you're working with a pay-per-call network and they get a payout bump from their advertiser and they give you a payout bump because you're sending really good quality traffic and share some of that win with you, that's a win-win. That means your incentives align, and that's a really good business relationship. When you want the exact same thing as your partner, that means your incentives align. Now, when your incentives don't align, when someone wants to do something that's good for them and not good for you, that can be a dangerous situation. You want to watch out for that in business and always make sure that everyone you're working with has their incentives aligned with what your goals are. Incorporation. This is the process of setting up an independent business entity. And in the United States, these can include C Corps, S Corps, LLCs, and LPs, limited partnerships. All these different entity types are just different ways that you can optimize your tax structure and liability. And so I highly recommend that you talk to an accountant and a lawyer before you go and incorporate. Not necessarily to do the work for you. I think with LegalZoom or just Googling the process yourself, setting up a company is a very easy thing, costs maybe $100, $200, depending on which state you want to incorporate in. But I highly recommend talking to an attorney and a lawyer first, even if you have to pay them, so that you can figure out which one of these entity types is absolutely best for what you want to accomplish. An independent agent. That's a third party that acts on their own behalf. And so that could be a contractor, or an independent salesperson, or someone that works on their own behalf that isn't a W-2 employee of your company. Maybe they work part-time, maybe they work full-time, but they work independently. And a lot of people in the performance marketing space, especially on the sales side, are independent agents. Insurance, a guarantee of compensation for a specified loss or damage in return for a payment of a premium. And so when you get insurance, you're simply paying someone monthly so that if something really bad happens to you, you're covered and you don't have to worry about taking a giant hit. Insurance is also one of the largest verticals in the pay-per-call space, and it's where a lot of our clients make a lot of money. There's essentially endless opportunity in the insurance space, so it's a really good space to think about if you have some background in it or you understand it well to get started in pay-per-call. Invoice. This is a bill sent from one party to another for money due, and so anytime someone owes you money, you should be sending them an invoice. If they don't pay the invoice or they don't pay their bill, this is a paper trail that you have. So if you have to go to collect from them or go to court, you have proof that you told them they owe you money for your contractual terms. You send it to them, and it makes collecting that money a lot easier. If you don't send out invoices because you're lazy or you don't know how to do it, you can run into problems if you need to collect money because you need to show that you were communicating and you sent a bill to the customer, okay? It's super easy to do this. You can Google free invoice generator. It takes like 2 minutes to generate an invoice. Just don't be lazy and make sure you send out all of your invoices, you do all your paperwork. Jurisdiction, the official power or authority to make specific decisions in a particular region or industry. Also used another way to say a country. We have entities in a few jurisdictions, or we do business in a few jurisdictions. A lot of Americans don't really use this term. A lot of foreigners do. And so if they're like, yeah, I'm working in a few jurisdictions, maybe they're running pay-per-call campaigns in the United States and Germany and Japan. I have no idea. It just can be anywhere and is essentially a country or a specific area that you're operating in. KPI, key performance indicator, client KPI, is a single metric used to measure and evaluate the performance and effectiveness of an organization, a process, or a business activity. So if you're running a call center, you have all sorts of KPIs. You have KPIs for employee performance, you have KPIs for conversion rate, revenue, all sorts of things. And so a KPI can be anything, but you want to understand what the KPIs are for the specific business you're trying to run. So if you're going to be a pay-per-call affiliate, you need to understand the KPIs for that. You know, what a click costs, what your conversion rate is, and what all the other KPIs are around what you're doing. And don't worry, we're going to dive into those later in this program. Legal, anything that's permitted or required by law, and also the department that manages contracts and legal requests inside an organization. So if someone says, yeah, send the contract to legal, they just mean send it to their legal department. Liabilities. This is the amount of outstanding payables and debt your organization has in any given period of time. And so if you're working with a whole bunch of advertisers and you owe them $50,000, you have $50,000 in accounts payable liabilities. Just the amount of money that you owe to other people for services that they've rendered to you. Licensed agents. These can be any call center agent that requires some type of formal licensing through a governmental body or other institution. So in the insurance space, for instance, certain activities require you to have a license by the government to sell insurance, or in the mortgage space, if you're going to be actually originating or issuing a loan and your call center is involved with that, you do need to have your mortgage license to be able to do it. So licensed agents are a cool thing. They actually give people a government pass to have basically a monopoly. So if you don't have this license, everyone else cannot participate in your business. And so these types of government licensing are in place to create a wall around an industry and protect it. And so anytime that an industry has government licensing involved, you probably can bet that there's going to be a high transaction value, a high profit margin, and it's going to be a good business to operate in because it requires extra work to get that licensing. And anytime extra work is required, it weeds out a lot of people from participating in the space because you may be surprised, a lot of people in business are pretty lazy and they don't want to do a lot of extra work. And so anytime you're willing to work more, to gain more information, learn new things, get licensed in new industries, it provides competitive advantage for you that keeps other people out of your space. Local, a business that operates in a specific and usually small geographic region. So if you're talking about local buyers, that could be someone that is working in the Chicago suburbs. Maybe they're not even in Chicago, they're just in a bunch of smaller suburbs on the outskirts. It's just a way of defining a small geographic region. And when you're working in a local region, as opposed to a big city, profit margins are typically higher because less people are operating there. That means that there's less competition and more opportunity. And the only downside to working in a local space is there's typically less volume because there's less people. Doesn't mean it's not worth it, but again, it just means you're going to have to put in more work to get the job done. I love servicing local areas in business because the margins are higher and a lot of people just don't want to deal with it. And so that to me is a really big opportunity. And we're going to be talking about how to build a local network of buyers inside of this course later in it. And that's what I think is one of the most profitable ways to get into the pay-per-call space. LTV, this is the lifetime value of a customer. So the average value of a user after they're no longer a customer. For instance, the LTV of the user that's paying $10 per month for 6 months is $60 if they do not renew their subscription after that 6 months. So basically, you're taking an average of all your customers, how much they pay you per month, and then how many months they're with you to figure out their lifetime value. And then that allows you to organize your marketing in such a way that it's profitable. So if you don't understand your lifetime value and you're billing people on a monthly basis, you can't accurately drive your marketing campaigns. If you're selling a product and you make $10 a month, maybe it costs you $25 to acquire that customer. If you don't know what your lifetime value is, you could potentially be losing money for every customer you acquire. Mail forwarding service. This is a mail service that's like an independent post office box. These businesses are not run by the government and typically provide other services like mail forwarding, email notification when mail arrives, scanning and shredding of mail, and a whole bunch more stuff. So if you're an affiliate looking to get into the pay-per-call space right now, and you're at home or you're young, like a lot of the affiliates I know, and you're sitting in your parents' basement right now, well, guess what you're going to need? You're going to need a mail forwarding service so you can have a legitimate address for your company. You probably don't want that at your house. You don't want your parents getting a whole bunch of mail at your house, then you have to deal with it. These things are also extremely convenient if you travel a lot. They'll scan all your mail in for you, email you copies of it, they'll forward it wherever it needs to go. It's a really great way to have a business address without actually going out and getting an office. Also, if you're going to send email, you have to have an address inside that email on the footer because of the CAN-SPAM Act. And so you probably don't want to use your home address if you're at home, or maybe even your office address, depending. And so these mail forwarding services are absolutely fantastic for that. They're cheap, they're easy, they're convenient, and I highly recommend finding one. There's hundreds of them out there. Margin, this is the amount of money in a transaction that's considered profit. For instance, if you sell something for $100, your cost is $50, you have a 50% profit margin, and your profit is $50. So to calculate your margin in dollars, you simply subtract your cost from your revenue. To calculate your margin as a percent, divide the dollar margin by the gross. So If you want to know what your profit margin is, on this example, you're going to divide 50 by 100, and you're going to get 50%, 0.5. It's that simple, and you're going to be able to want to do these transactions off the top of your head. You're going to want to be able to calculate this very, very quickly, because you're constantly going to be reviewing statistics in internet marketing, and your goal when reviewing those statistics is to understand what your profit margin is. Because if you spend $100 and only make 50 in gross revenue, that's a loss, and you need to be prepared to calculate these margins so that you can make sure you don't lose money. A merchant processor, this is a business that processes credit card transactions or other types of financial transactions on behalf of a business. MRR, this is your monthly reoccurring revenue if you sell a product or service that has a monthly fee. So it's a measure of how much recurring revenue a business can expect every single month, typically used by companies that sell software, subscriptions, or services, like insurance companies or Ringba, for instance. Anyone that charges things on a monthly basis, you can use MRR to calculate it. And it's important to understand what your monthly recurring revenue is so that you have an idea of how your business is functioning, if that is something you sell. Negotiation. This is the very important process of coming to an agreement over terms between two parties that are entering into a mutually beneficial relationship. So we have a whole section on negotiation in this course, but real quick, negotiation is extremely important. Under no circumstances should you ever accept someone's first offer. The first offer is almost never the best offer. Now, some people do like to give their best offer the first time, but you need to understand who those people are, and you'll learn over time that some people just don't want to deal with negotiation, and they view other people as their partners, and so they just make solid offers the first time. But that's pretty rare. And even if you're dealing with those people, you can always still try and negotiate. Maybe they tell you no, maybe they tell you yes. But in no circumstance in business should you not at least attempt to negotiate. If you're dealing with real business people, they will not be offended if you try to negotiate with them. So something you should get really used to. And if you're a person that doesn't do well with conflict, negotiation is not necessarily conflict, and you're just going to have to learn how to overcome that. Otherwise, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage when working with just about everybody, because everything in business is negotiation. Net margin. Net margin is the revenue minus the cost of goods, advertising, or any other overhead required to run your business. So you take the cost of goods sold, all the other expenses, subtract it from your revenue, and then you have your net margin, your actual profit margin. A net payment, like net 7 or net 15, these are payment terms where one party will pay a specific number of days after a set pay period. For instance, monthly net 7 payment terms means that whatever amount is due at the end of the month, it will be paid 7 days after the closing of that billing period. So if you have your January revenue, you're going to be paid that on February 7th, assuming it's net 7. Or depending on if there's a weekend in there, payments don't typically go out on weekends. Great companies pay people before and early, though a lot of them end up paying late if there's a weekend in there, and you should expect that. You should never run your business so that you're expecting a single payment on a specific day, and if that payment doesn't arrive, your business falls over, okay? You should always assume that companies will pay a little bit later than they're supposed to. Now, that doesn't mean they always will. Some great companies pay on time, every time, without question, but the correct way to view your payment terms is just to assume that people are going to pay you late so that you have enough capital that you're never going to run into any issues, especially in the affiliate and pay-per-call spaces. Net revenue, this is the amount of money left over after you take the gross revenue and subtract all the costs of doing business. Essentially the same thing as net margin. Non-payment, burn, or getting burned, it's a term that is used quite a bit in our industry. Money owed to a business that has not been paid. And I cannot stress this enough, guys. Make sure you know who you're doing business with. Ask for references. Ask in the Ringba communities if anyone's done business with the people you want to do business with. Do your own research. If you do not do your research, you prepay someone, someone owes you money and they don't pay, you're probably not going to be able to collect it. If the amount's small, if you're talking a couple $1,000s, it's too expensive to sue people over a couple $1,000s, to see people get burned all the time, and it's their fault. The information you're looking for is available on the internet. References will tell you how it is to do business with people. You just need to take the time to not be lazy and make sure you're working with good business partners. NPS score, Net Promoter Score, Net Promoters. This is a method of determining how loyal customers are to a product or brand. And so it's a survey that goes out and you ask people how satisfied they are, and they generate a Net Promoter Score, an NPS score. When you're working with a call center, these terms may be thrown around because NPS scores are tied to specific agents. And so a lot of call centers keep an NPS score on an agent to see how good the agent is, or in general, overall, on their traffic streams. So if you're a publisher and you're sending calls to a buyer and they do an NPS score specifically on your traffic, they're going to be able to compare your NPS scores to other traffic sources' NPS scores to determine how quality the consumers you're driving are. And this is a great metric to look at, make changes to a campaign, and then increase quality. And, you know, a lot of pay-per-call networks don't keep track of this type of stuff. A lot of buyers don't either, but the really good ones do. And when you find the ones that do, it's important that you get this information, because the higher quality your traffic is, the better your calls are, the more negotiating power you have with them to ask for higher payouts. Onboarding. This is the process of introducing and familiarizing an employee or client with the company's products or services. And so when you're working with another company and they talk about their onboarding process for a new partner, they're just simply talking about the process you have to go through to start working with them. Operating expenses. These are the expenses required to run a business, not including the cost of your goods or advertising, okay? It's just simply the overhead. What your costs are to keep the lights on, the internet on, the rent paid, your employees, taxes, insurance, all the stuff you need when you're running a business. And you don't need all those things at first, but as it grows, these things become important. You add all those together and they're your operating expenses. Opportunity cost. When running a business, you have to be careful and precise about your time allocation. Opportunity cost is the cost of your time and energy focused on one task, when it could be focused on another. For instance, if you're spending 3 hours a day making banners for your advertising campaign instead of doing business development, you could outsource that function to someone else cheaply, reclaiming those 3 hours. The time you spend missing out on opportunities because you are too busy is the opportunity cost. And the more successful you become, the more you realize that your most valuable asset is not money, it's not your skills, it's not your material possessions or resources, it is simply your time. And so you become very sensitive to opportunity cost. And as you grow, it's important to think about this throughout your entire life. You know, what's the opportunity cost of spending 6 hours watching Netflix when you're trying to start a business? Well, that's 6 hours you could be hustling while your competition is sleeping. And so, or doing something else. And so it's very important that you start to value your time as an asset. And once you understand what the value of your time is, then you will be able to deploy it better. Outsourcing. This is the process of finding labor sources outside of your home country, or maybe in your home country, typically avoiding tax liabilities and government requirements. The global labor force also works at a market rate and is cheaper than labor in first world countries. So websites like Upwork, for instance, are amazing for outsourcing. You don't have to pay people taxes. You don't have to worry about their payroll tax. You don't have to worry about keeping them on staff. There's really no law whatsoever. You can fire them anytime you want. Wherever most people are, it's typically cheaper than hiring someone in the United States. Now, you get what you pay for, and sometimes outsourcing is not a good way to do things. For instance, with Ringba, we decided when we started the company, we would never outsource an engineer. We would only hire senior engineers that come from big companies and have a ton of experience. No one directly out of college, and definitely no one overseas in third world countries without the education or the know-how to actually build software. And so for us, that's an incredibly expensive process. But again, it allows us to build the world's most sophisticated call tracking software. So there's pros and cons. However, if you need to have some banners done for your advertising campaigns, or you need someone to do some web research or fill out a spreadsheet, just about anyone on earth can do that if they have some basic skills. Those are the type of things that you should be outsourcing so you get your time back. And so if you think about it, how much money do you make? Well, if you make 100 grand a year, you simply divide that by 52 weeks a year, 5 days, 8 hours a day if you're working a 9 to 5, or maybe 16 hours a day if you're hustling real hard. You figure out what your time is worth, and then if you're making $50 an hour, you shouldn't be doing processes that you can outsource for $6 an hour. It's just simply a math equation. And so it goes back to opportunity cost, and this is something that you absolutely need to think about, especially as you grow your business. Though I do want to say that sometimes it's just faster and easier to do things yourself. For instance, I'll occasionally edit a website or write a little code or maybe change a banner or maybe even edit a little video in the pay-per-caller show. If it's just going to take me 30 seconds as opposed to finding someone to do it, giving them instructions, sending all the files, if it's a real quick thing, that's okay to do yourself, and sometimes it's super convenient. So these are the pros and cons of outsourcing and are important to weigh when you're thinking about your opportunity cost. Payables. This is the amount of money owed from your organization to clients and vendors at any given period of time. So it's the amount of money that you owe to other people for services that they have rendered. Payment terms. What are the terms? This is the criteria that must be met in order to receive payment, or the criteria that has to be met to pay someone else. So what are your payment terms? Maybe they're monthly net 7, maybe they're weekly net 7, maybe they're net 60. Or maybe payment terms means that you'll only be paid if you send calls from specific geographic regions or calls that meet specific quality requirements. A bump or a payout bump is asking an affiliate network or pay-per-call network or affiliate manager to bump your payout when you want more money for a conversion. You should always ask your affiliate managers to raise or bump your payouts for any campaigns you plan to run for long periods of time or that have substantial volume, okay? Affiliate managers will typically bump up any payout when asked without much resistance, but they won't do it unless you ask. I guarantee you no affiliate manager is gonna hit you up and be like, hey, your traffic's awesome. Let me give you more money for no reason. No, they're gonna let you run the campaign, they're gonna leave your payout exactly the same, and then you're gonna keep sending traffic. The only reason you're gonna hear from them is if you dial the traffic back or there's an issue. And if you don't hear from them after a few days or a week and there aren't any issues, you should hit them up and immediately tell them, hey, I see you like my traffic. Looks like it's good quality, haven't heard from you. Listen, I need a payout bump. And we'll talk more about that in the negotiation section, but you should absolutely, positively always ask for a payout bump on every single campaign you run ever when you're doing online marketing. No exceptions. Always ask. Worst case scenario, they tell you no. And if they tell you no, tell them that you need it anyways. Don't give up. Be relentless. Keep asking for it because they have margin. They can give it to you. It's not hard for them to do it. And typically an affiliate manager doesn't even need to go ask their boss to do it. And so you need to take advantage of that information and get yourself more money. You're the one doing all the work anyways if you're an affiliate. PCI compliance, PCI DSS, these are the payment card industry data security standards. And these are a set of standards that were created to increase the controls around credit card holder data to reduce credit card fraud. And essentially they mean you can't store payment data. It all has to be encrypted. You need to use a vault. And so if you're selling a product or service and you're accepting credit cards, you either need to work with a company that's doing PCI compliance for you or you need to understand PCI compliance. The reason this is in here is you'll hear PCI compliance thrown around when talking to call centers. Because call centers taking credit cards over the phone are very high risk for banks. And so you're going to hear these terms thrown around if you're ever working with a buyer that accepts credit cards over the phone. Platform fees, these are the costs associated with using any type of software platform. So if you're a Ringba customer, our platform fees may be a monthly fee, maybe usage for minutes or phone numbers, but it's just the fees that we charge. So when someone says, what are your platform fees or what are the platform fees? You just know that they're the costs associated with using some type of software platform. A P.O. box is a post office box. This is a mailbox set up to receive mail at a government post office that can be used for personal or business uses. They don't look like an office. They say P.O. box on them. If a company won't accept a P.O. box address, you need to get one of those mail forwarding addresses we talked about earlier. But a lot of businesses run out of a P.O. box, so you don't have to use your home address if you work from home. PR, this is public relations, and that's using the press to distribute information about your business, driving customers and name recognition. Okay, PR is not a marketing plan unless you have a background in it and are extremely experienced. I want to repeat that. Press and public relations is not a marketing plan. If you're running a business or you want to build a business, unless you know exactly what you're doing and you're highly skilled in public relations, you should not be thinking that press is a business plan. If you watch Shark Tank, people will say, yeah, I got all this press, I was in the news, great. Well, the news doesn't work for you, and the moment they don't care anymore is the moment your marketing dries up. So you cannot rely on PR to actually drive sales in a business unless you're an extremely good professional. Okay, today's media cycles runs in periods of hours, not days, and it is complicated to hold their attention long enough to get repeated exposure. And that's why in this class, you'll notice that later on we have lessons on all sorts of marketing, online marketing, offline marketing, television marketing, radio marketing, but you will not hear anything about public relations beyond this point, simply because you can't control the output, so don't waste your time on the input. Prepaid, this is the practice of paying for a service or product before receiving or using it. And so if you're working with a call center and you've built up a reputation as an affiliate that drives quality calls in a pay-per-call fashion, especially if that call center or business is overseas, you're going to want to receive a prepayment. You want to be prepaid for the phone calls so that if they receive those calls and decide they don't want to pay you, you're not left holding the bag. Sometimes if you're working with a new call center and they want to assess quality, I'm a big advocate of sending, maybe 10 or 15 free calls. You set up a campaign in Ringba, you divert a few phone calls to that new call center. It's nice and easy to do. It's entirely automated. You put a cap on it, give them some free calls. It builds goodwill. It makes them happy. They can assess your quality, and then you demand a prepayment. But either way, get your payment up front first. If you're working directly with a buyer, whenever possible. Pay-per-call networks are not going to prepay you unless you already have an incredibly awesome reputation in the industry, and they're trying to earn your business from somebody else. So make sure that you're working with highly reputable pay-per-call networks, because they're going to pay you after receiving the calls. Privacy, this is the right to withhold or provide personal information. Privacy is a big deal. Data privacy is a big deal. If you are collecting consumer data, you want to make sure that you're handling it with care. You don't have any issues with that data. You want to make sure you know exactly where it's going and exactly how it's being used for. And so you want to keep consumer data private. You don't want to give your employees access to all your customer data. You want to keep everything siloed so you don't have any issues. Profit, this is the money left over when all business expenses has been paid. Profit is the reason we're in this, guys. We're here to make money, and profit is that money you make when you have a business that's running efficiently. Rates, this is the cost of using a product or service. So for instance, when you're talking about Ringba, we have telecom rates, per minute rates, per phone number rates. It's just the cost associated with using a specific product or service. Receivables, this is the amount of money due to your organization at any given period of time. And so it's all the money that's owed to you from all the people that owe you money. Those are your receivables. Registered agent, this is a responsible party registered with the government office, responsible for receiving communication about a corporate entity. So if you don't have your own office and you want to open up a company, you can hire a registered agent who will make sure all the mail from the government comes to their office and everything is taken care of for you. And so registered agents are amazing. I highly recommend that you use one if you open up a company, especially if you don't know what you're doing. They're not that expensive. Some of them are $100 a year, and it's just super cheap way to make sure you have a legitimate address and that all your paperwork is headed to the right place and you get all your government notices. Retention, this is the ability to retain customers over a specific period of time. When you're talking about your retention, talking about how long customers stay with you. Or maybe employees. Employee retention is exactly the same thing. How long does an employee stay with you after they start? And so retention is a really good metric, especially in the call center world, talking about retaining your customers and retaining your employees. Both typically have high turnover in a call center. Revenue, this is the gross amount of money that you receive whenever criteria is met. So whenever your company has money coming in, that's your revenue. A rev share, which is revenue share, is when revenue is generated from a sale and split between two parties based on the total volume spent. For instance, if you receive 10% revenue share for whatever products you sold on a website, when you sell $100 worth of goods, you receive a $10 commission, excuse me. And so in the pay-per-call world, there are absolutely revenue share campaigns. Happens a lot in the legal space, and that means you drive calls, and when they actually sell something, you get a percentage of what's sold instead of a flat rate. And so you bear all the risk in a rev share, but you can make a lot more money that way if you work in specific verticals. ROI, that's your return on investment. A marketing campaign's main purpose is to generate profit for a company, client, product, or service being promoted. It's important to calculate that profit regularly throughout the process and monitor it on an ongoing basis by determining the campaign's ROI, or the return on investment. And so basically what we're trying to do here is see if I spent $100, did I make more than $100? All right, that's my return on investment. And return on investment can be negative too. In business, nothing is for sure, and you should always be prepared to lose a little bit of money every now and again. Failure is part of the process. And so ROI can be calculated by subtracting your advertising cost from the gross revenue and dividing the difference by the original advertising cost and multiplying it by 100 for the percentage ROI. And so basically, if you have $100 in advertising costs and you did $150 in revenue, you get $50 in profit, and then you divide that out, multiply by 100, and your return on investment is 50%. SaaS is software as a service, and this is a business model for software companies that charge customers on a reoccurring basis for access to their technology. Ringba is a SaaS platform. We take care of absolutely everything for you. You don't have to worry about installing software, uptime, nothing. We take care of all of it, and we host it. You don't have to worry about anything but running your business, and that's the beauty behind software as a service. SEPA is the single euro payments area, and this is an initiative in the European Union for integrating payments and simplifying bank transfers in Europe. So if you're working in Europe and you sell a product or service, you can accept SEPA or SEPA Direct Debit, and this is very similar to an ACH in the United States, but you should also be very careful. A SEPA transaction can be easily charged back. It is not permanent like a wire transfer. It's a way to accept funds. A lot of companies pay out commissions in SEPA, so if you're in Europe, a company will pay you commissions in SEPA, but you want to make sure that you have your agreements in place so you never get any chargebacks. Service, real simply, is the business practice of providing specialized work in exchange for a payment. So I do a service for you, you give me money for that service. It's how business works. Slack, this is a cloud-based tool for communicating and collaborating with teams. It's an awesome tool. It's actually the only thing that's up on my screen right now is Slack. You get lots of notifications in it. You can do integrations with it. It's really amazing for pulling things together in your business, and it's super easy to integrate with. So when you start having a bunch of different systems in place and you want to aggregate all your data, get notifications for things, Slack is an amazing way to do it. We highly recommend it. All of our engineering teams and sales teams use Slack for all Ringba notifications. SMB, this is a small to medium business. So established businesses that are limited in scope and resources due to their size and requirements. So small to medium business could be a dentist office, a tow truck driver, a single guy, or it could be maybe someone that owns 4 LASIK centers, but basically a small to medium-sized business, not a Fortune 500, not a global brand. regional businesses or local businesses qualify as a small to medium business. Spread, this is another term for margin. So if I spend $100 on clicks and I make $150 in commission, my spread is 50 bucks. And so a lot of people just say their spread as opposed to their profit or their margins, just another term for it. Startup is a hipster term for a newly established business. And so typically a startup is going to have some type of outside funding or working very fast to grow their business, but it is essentially just a business. Tax liability, the amount of money you owe to a government for taxes during a specific taxable period of time. So if you run a business and you have profit, that's a great thing, but you have tax liability. You owe the government money for the profits you made. So I will assert that it is extremely important that you have an accountant and someone to take care of all your taxes. A lot of affiliates and new people that get into the online advertising space do not take the time to do this. And I highly recommend that you get some advice, you find yourself an attorney, you find yourself an accountant. Maybe you don't use them immediately, but you develop that relationship so you can ask questions, and then you pay your taxes, okay? Just do it. Be an adult, pay your taxes, contribute to society, and make sure you have no issues. I've seen far too many affiliates not take care of this, and then they end up in a bad situation. Don't do that. Save your money, pay your taxes, get professional advice. Trade show. This is an event for businesses and individuals involved in a particular industry to network. And so I will tell you this. I have made tens of millions of dollars simply by showing up at trade shows. My business partners, I met at trade shows. My best friends, I met at trade shows. The vast majority of business I've conducted in my entire life is from trade shows and the people I meet at them. It allows you to shake people's hands, show them that you're real, show them that you're serious, and create relationships. And when you create a relationship with someone by showing up at a trade show, they're willing to take a risk on you. So if you're new and you're trying to get into the pay-per-call space and you don't have any connections, you don't have a lot of traffic, maybe you have nothing, and you're just curious and you're listening to me ramble because you want to understand how to start a business in this space. The first thing you should figure out how to do is get to a trade show, okay? I'll be at the trade show. You can come up to me. I work the booth every single time with my teams. It's that easy. You just show up at the trade show, shake my hand, talk to me, ask questions. And that goes for all the pay-per-call networks. They're all there. All the service providers are there. A ton of other affiliates are there. We pay for a lot of networking events. We pay for parties. Ringba threw 2 parties at the last trade show to get people together, connect them so that they can do business with each other. And so I'm telling you right now, if you have not been to an industry trade show, it will change the path of your professional career. It will change the trajectory of your business. And so if you want to get into a business, maybe it's not pay-per-call and you're listening to this, you decide you want to work in lawn care, okay, or the cigar industry, there's a trade show for it, and your ass should be going to that trade show so you can meet all the players in the space, develop those relationships, and ask lots of questions. Because very rarely can you get the smartest people from an industry all in the same room willing to talk to you and teach you for basically free. And so I challenge you, if you haven't been to an industry trade show and you actually take business seriously, you should be there. I want you to find me at one of these marketing trade shows. I want you to come up to me and say, Adam, I came to the trade show because you told me to come to the trade show. And I'm going to say to you, that's amazing. How can I help you grow your business today? And guess what we'll do? We'll talk about that, and maybe we'll make some introductions. Maybe we'll solve some problems that you need. Maybe you'll get that piece of advice that takes your business to the next level, but you will never know unless you show up. And so if you get anything out of this glossary lesson, the one takeaway I want you to take away is show up at a trade show, give it your all, meet the people in your industry, because that's how you're going to start and can create a real business. Transparency. This is the practice of operating in a way that is easy for others to see what actions are performed, or to just be honest, okay? And so there's something to be said for honesty and transparency in business. If you have a problem, tell the truth. If you need help, ask for it, okay? Don't bullshit. If you're bullshitting to an expert, they're gonna know. If you're bullshitting to someone who's been in an industry for the last, I don't know, 10 years, they're gonna know because they've seen it before. And one of the most surprising qualities is honesty in business. And it'll get you a long way, especially at a trade show, for instance. You go up to someone and you're like, hey, I've just gotten started in pay-per-call. I've learned a lot. I'm driving a few calls. I want to take my business to the next level. Can you help me? Guess what? If you're just honest like that, people will help you. Maybe some people will be dicks, but most of them, the ones you want to work with, they're going to help you because we were all in those shoes before. All right? First trade show I went to, I was 17 years old. Okay? I had a couple computers in my parents' basement, and I flew to Las Vegas and went to a trade show, and I thought it was crazy. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And you know what? I went up to someone that I had done a little bit of business with. I still know them today. This was over 15 years ago. I talked to them yesterday on Skype. And I said, hey, I'm new. Can you introduce me to this person? Can you teach me a little bit about this? And that guy actually walked me around the trade show and introduced me to the CEOs of a bunch of other companies. And I ended up making millions of dollars by showing up at that trade show. And so I was honest and said, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? And I think transparency is an important human value in every relationship, not necessarily just business and in your personal relationships. When you can be honest with yourself, the people you care about, and the people you do business with, you're going to set yourself up for a lifetime of success. If you're not going to be transparent, you're just going to bullshit, lie to people, make false claims, whatever, you're not going to succeed for the long term because people will find out and you only get one chance. And so transparency is very important. So transparency and honesty, some of the most important things in business if you want to generate long-term relationships with quality people. If you want to generate short-term relationships with crappy people, don't be transparent, okay? Upsell. An additional offer presented to a user during or after the checkout process to increase the average order value, okay? So after someone's purchased, or maybe they've been on the phone, they bought an insurance policy, you try to sell them something else to generate more money on the sale. That's an upsell. Vertical integration, this is the process of cutting out all the vendors, manufacturers, service providers, brokers, everyone in the value chain to control the entire process and reap the rewards of lower cost and higher margins every step of the way. And so in pay-per-call, if you're dealing with a bunch of brokers, your margins are going to be lower, your conversion rate's going to be lower, everything's going to be lower. And so your goal here is to vertically integrate, cut everyone out of the value chain, and do everything yourself, essentially. And so the most profitable, biggest business in the world, all of them have vertical integration procedures. They're always looking to cut out their suppliers and go more direct whenever they can. It's a very simple business process and practice. You identify people who are making money off your work and you try and remove them out of the situation. At times it can increase more risk, definitely adds more work, but at the same time, if you want your margins to be higher, it's something that you have to engage in. Weekly payments, these are the ideal payments for an affiliate or a pay-per-call affiliate. I would say that most of the time, as a pay-per-call affiliate, you're not going to get a weekly payment, but that's the ideal scenario, and that's payments made on a weekly basis. And that's typically payments on a weekly basis are made as weekly net 7, which means you're getting a payment every week, but it's 1 week delayed, okay? And so the funds are paid 7 days after the close of the billing period. So weekly payments are great. It lowers your risk, allows you to reinvest that money as soon as possible into building bigger campaigns. And so when you're new, cash flow is really important. You need to build up a nest egg that you can deploy to buy advertising and grow your business. So you want to ask those networks to accelerate your payment terms if you're working with them. And this is very similar to a payout bump. If they're paying you monthly net 7, you should be bothering them every 2 weeks. Hey, can you give me faster payments? Hey, I proved my quality. Can I get faster payments? Hey, if you give me faster payments, I can up the volume and drive more calls. And so you should be asking 100% of the time when you're working with buyers, networks, anybody, can you pay me faster? It reduces your risk and allows you to grow faster. And so in no circumstances should you just accept what people give you. Even if they say no, keep asking. Do it with good spirits. Handle the no's well. Smile, but keep asking for faster payment terms because it can be imperative to your success growing your business. White label. This is a business practice where a product or service is created by one company and then rebranded by another to make it look like their own. For instance, Ringba has white label functionality built into it, so you can change the brand of our platform, make it look like your website, change the colors, change the entire user interface, upload your logo, and host it on your own domain name. And so if you want to start your own call business, media agency, pay-per-call network, use it for call centers, whatever you want to do, you can customize it so it matches your brand, and that's what a white label is. And white labels are awesome. It means it makes you look really great, like you have your own technology platform and control of your own business and a seamless brand experience throughout, and you don't have to make any investments in actually building the platform. Wholesale, this is the price of bulk goods directly from a manufacturer, broker, or importer. Okay, so anytime you're going direct, you're getting something for wholesale. And typically, when you buy a lot, you get cheaper prices. You're buying business to business. It's a wholesale transaction. A wire transfer, okay, or TT, as some foreigners call it if you're not American, is a telegraphic encrypted transfer of funds using a global banking system. This is the fastest and safest form of funds transfer any banking system offers and cannot be reversed once processed unless there are extreme extenuating circumstances like fraud or theft or identity theft or something. So if someone sends you a wire transfer, that money is yours as soon as it hits your account. So anytime you want to accept a payment from someone for calls, a prepayment, especially if it's from overseas, wire transfer, guys. Wire transfer is the only way to do it because you're guaranteed the money is yours and it can't go anywhere.